The restaurant was alive that night, rich with the clinking of fine crystal, murmured conversations, and the scent of truffle oil hanging in the air like expensive perfume. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, trying to ignore the trembling in my fingers as I balanced 3 plates of seared scallops along my forearm. 6 months at Vermilion, Boston's most exclusive restaurant, and I still felt like an imposter among the wealthy patrons who barely glanced my way. "Table 7, Emma," Marcel, the head chef, barked as he slid another gleaming plate across the stainless steel counter. His eyes, already moving to the next order, dismissed me before I'd even taken a step. I nodded, though no one was looking, and navigated between the tables with practiced precision. My black uniform blended with the shadows by design. We were meant to be invisible, appearing only when needed and vanishing immediately after. The weight of the day pulled at my shoulders. Double shifts had become my norm since Mom's medical bills started piling up, each envelope stamped with increasingly urgent red letters. The soft jazz from the quartet in the corner wrapped around me as I approached Table 7, a secluded booth partially hidden by a dramatic arrangement of white orchids. I kept my eyes down as I set each plate before the diners with a quiet, "Please enjoy." The women wore jewelry that probably cost more than my yearly rent. The men, watches that could pay off Mom's entire medical debt. "Thank you, darling," one of the women said, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she reached for her wine glass. She wasn't really seeing me. I was just part of the scenery, like the crystal chandelier or the hand-painted silk wallpaper. As I turned to leave, I caught the reflection of a man entering the restaurant in one of the mirrored columns. Something about him made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. He moved with unhurried confidence, as though the world adjusted its pace to accommodate him rather than the other way around. Dark suit, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders, hair the color of burnished copper under the amber lights. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, their eyes constantly scanning the room, hands positioned suspiciously close to the inside of their jackets. I forced myself to look away and continued toward the kitchen, but not before I noticed the maitre d' practically sprinting to greet the newcomer, bowing slightly as he spoke. Whoever this man was, he commanded deference without saying a word. "Emma," Marcel's voice cracked through the air. "Table 12 needs water, and 19 is ready for dessert." I rushed to fill the orders, weaving between tables with practiced ease. Yet I couldn't help but notice the ripple effect the copper-haired man had on the restaurant. Conversations hushed as he passed. The owner, Mr. Delaney, who I'd seen turn away celebrities without a second thought, emerged from his office to personally escort him to a table in the back corner, the best in the house with its view of both the entrance and the entire dining room. 3 hours later, my feet ached as I cleared the last table of the night. Most of the patrons had left, the quartet had packed away their instruments, and only a handful of diners remained, including the copper-haired man and his companions, who had been joined by 2 older gentlemen with severe expressions. They spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing around the room. I tried not to stare, but there was something magnetic about him, something dangerous yet alluring that made it difficult to look away. "Emma." Jessica, another server, whispered urgently as she passed me. "Be careful with Table 8, that's Luca Vargo." The name registered immediately. Everyone in Boston knew of the Vargo family. Officially, they owned shipping companies, real estate developments, and several high-end nightclubs. Unofficially, they controlled much of the city's underworld. Luca had taken over from his father 2 years ago, after the elder Vargo's mysterious disappearance. The gossip among the staff was that the transition hadn't been entirely voluntary. "I know," I whispered back, though I hadn't connected the name to the face until now. "I'm staying clear." But as luck would have it, Mr. Delaney approached me just as I entered the kitchen with a stack of dirty plates. "Emma, I need you to take over Table 8. Javier had to leave. Family emergency." My heart sank. "But No excuses. They've ordered the 82 Bordeaux. Decant it properly." He pressed the wine key into my palm and disappeared before I could protest. With trembling hands, I prepared the wine service, arranging the decanter, proper glasses, and a white linen cloth on a silver tray. The bottle alone cost more than 3 months of my rent. If I broke it, I'd be fired instantly, and probably blacklisted from every fine dining establishment in the city. I approached Table 8 with careful steps, keeping my eyes lowered respectfully. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I'll be serving you for the remainder of the evening." When I looked up, Luca Vargo's eyes were already on me. Piercing, intelligent, and the most unusual shade of amber I'd ever seen, almost golden in the dim light. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. Either way, it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cool, assessing gaze that seemed to strip away my carefully constructed server persona and see straight through to the exhausted, worried woman beneath. "The Bordeaux," I said, showing him the label. My voice remained steady, though my pulse did not. He nodded once, his eyes never leaving my face as I began the ritual of opening the wine. I was acutely aware of his scrutiny as I cut the foil, inserted the corkscrew, and extracted the cork with a soft, satisfying pop. After offering it for inspection, I began to pour a small amount into his glass for tasting. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low and smooth, with just a hint of something foreign in his accent. "Emma," I replied, surprised that he would ask. Most patrons didn't care to know who served them. "Emma," he repeated, as though testing how my name felt on his tongue. He took the glass, swirled the ruby liquid, inhaled its bouquet, and then tasted it without ever breaking eye contact with me. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "Perfect." I poured for the other men at the table, careful not to spill a drop. As I reached the last glass, belonging to a silver-haired man with cold eyes, he smiled at me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Aren't you a pretty little thing?" he said, his gaze traveling down my body in a slow, deliberate assessment. "How about a smile, sweetheart?" Before I could force my lips into the practiced server smile I'd perfected over years in the service industry, Luca's voice cut through the air, soft, yet somehow filling the entire space around us. "Smile for me, not for him," he said, the words deceptively gentle, though there was nothing gentle about the steel beneath them. The restaurant, already quiet as the night wound down, fell completely silent. Even the kitchen sounds seemed to stop, as though the very air was holding its breath. The silver-haired man's smile faltered, then disappeared entirely as he slowly withdrew his gaze and fixed his attention on his wineglass. "My apologies, Mr. Vargo," he murmured, not meeting Luca's eyes. I stood frozen, the empty wine bottle clutched in my hands, unsure what had just happened or how to respond. Luca turned to me, his expression unreadable. "That will be all for now, Emma. Thank you." I nodded, gathered my composure, and retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Through the kitchen doors, I heard conversation slowly resume at the table, though notably subdued. "What happened out there?" Jessica asked, eyes wide as she pulled me into the corner by the dishwashing station. "I don't know," I said honestly, still trying to process the exchange. The older man made a comment, and Luca Vargo intervened. "Luca Vargo knew your name? And defended you?" Her voice rose an octave. "Emma, that's not normal. He doesn't even acknowledge the existence of the staff when he comes in." Before I could respond, Mr. Delaney burst through the doors, looking flustered. "Emma, Mr. Vargo has requested that you bring the dessert menu personally." He straightened my collar nervously. "Don't keep him waiting." With the dessert menus clutched to my chest like a shield, I returned to table 8. The silver-haired man avoided looking at me entirely, while the others gave me brief, appraising glances before returning to their conversation. Only Luca watched me openly as I approached. "The dessert menus, gentlemen," I said, placing one before each man. "What do you recommend, Emma?" Luca asked, his focus entirely on me now. I swallowed. "The chocolate soufflé is exceptional, sir, though it takes 20 minutes to prepare." "Then we'll have 5 of those." He closed the menu without looking at it and handed it back to me, his fingers brushing against mine. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt up my arm. "And coffee for everyone." I nodded and turned to leave, feeling the weight of his gaze on my back. The night finally ended just after midnight. As the last patrons left and we began closing procedures, Mr. Delaney called me into his office, a rare occurrence that immediately set my nerves on edge. "Emma," he began, looking uncomfortable, "Mr. Vargo left this for you." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a generous tip. far more than I would typically make in a week, and a business card with just a phone number embossed in simple black text. No name, no company, nothing else. He also asked about your schedule. Mr. Delaney continued, studying my reaction carefully. My schedule? I repeated, confusion mingling with an undefined apprehension. Yes. I informed him that you work Tuesday through Saturday evenings. He hesitated. I hope that was acceptable. He's an important patron. I nodded numbly, though internally I was reeling. Why would Luca Vargo want to know when I worked? The business card felt heavy in my hand, loaded with implication. You can go now, Mr. Delaney said, clearly relieved to end the conversation. I gathered my things from my locker, pulled on my worn wool coat, and stepped out into the cold Boston night. The restaurant was located in the historic part of the city, where narrow cobblestone streets wound between stately old buildings. Usually, I enjoyed the walk to the tea station, even at night. But tonight every shadow seemed deeper, every sound more ominous. I had gone only half a block when a sleek black car pulled alongside me, moving at walking pace. My heart leaped into my throat as the rear window rolled down, revealing Luca Vargo's face, illuminated by the soft interior light. It's late, Emma. Allow me to offer you a ride home. It wasn't really a request. The two men I'd seen with him earlier stood nearby, their expressions impassive, hands still positioned near what I now assumed were concealed weapons. That's very kind, but I don't want to trouble you, I managed, calculating how quickly I could run to the main street if necessary. It's no trouble, he said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. In fact, I insist. The car door opened, an invitation I wasn't sure I could refuse. Fear, and something else, curiosity perhaps, warred within me. The practical part of my brain screamed danger, but another part wondered why this powerful, dangerous man had singled me out. What did he want from me? And why did I feel this inexplicable pull toward him, despite knowing exactly who and what he was? In that moment, standing on the dark, empty street with Luca Vargo waiting for my decision, I made a choice that would irreversibly alter the course of my life, though I had no way of knowing it then. I slid into the car beside him, the leather seat cool and smooth against my tired legs, and the door closed with a soft, decisive click. The interior of the car smelled of expensive leather and something else, a woody, masculine scent that I guessed was Luca's cologne. As we pulled away from the curb, the city lights played across his face in alternating patterns of gold and shadow. Up close, I could see the fine details I'd missed at the restaurant. A small scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the slight stubble darkening his jaw, and the way his copper hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Where do you live, Emma? His voice was calm, conversational, as though offering rides to restaurant servers was something he did regularly. Dorchester, I answered, suddenly self-conscious about my working-class neighborhood. Near Fields Corner. He nodded once and spoke quietly to his driver, who adjusted course without comment. The man sitting in the passenger seat kept his gaze forward, but I could tell he was alert to everything happening around us. Neither of them had been introduced to me, and I didn't dare ask. How long have you worked at Vermilion? Luca asked, turning his attention back to me. 6 months, I replied, my hands fidgeting with the strap of my worn handbag. Before that, I was at the Harrington downtown. And before that? His eyes never left my face, studying me with an intensity that made me both uncomfortable and strangely flattered. College. I was studying nursing at Boston University until I trailed off, not wanting to share my personal struggles with a stranger, especially not this stranger, until I had to take a break. Something in his expression told me he caught my hesitation, but he didn't press. Nursing, a noble profession, caring for others. I nodded, unsure how to respond. We fell into silence as the car glided through the nearly empty streets. The financial district gave way to older neighborhoods, the elegant brownstones eventually transitioning to the more modest buildings of my area. I expected to feel relief as we approached familiar territory, but instead, I felt increasingly nervous. What would happen when we arrived? Why had he really offered me a ride? You're wondering why I'm interested in you, Luca said suddenly, as though reading my thoughts. My eyes snapped to his face. Yes, I admitted, deciding honesty was my best option. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. Directness. I appreciate that. He shifted slightly, angling his body toward mine. You caught my attention, Emma. Not many people do. Because I was serving your table? I asked, genuinely confused. His smile widened a fraction. No. Because when you thought no one was looking, I saw the real you. Not the carefully constructed mask you wear for the patrons, but the woman underneath. Intelligent, observant, struggling. His voice softened on the last word, and because when Salvatore made his crude comment, you didn't immediately capitulate with a false smile, there was a moment, brief but noticeable, of resistance. I swallowed hard, surprised by his perception. Most people don't notice things like that. I'm not most people, he replied simply. The car slowed as we approached my apartment building, a 3-story brick structure that had seen better days. I felt a flash of embarrassment as Luca's eyes assessed the graffiti-tagged mailboxes and the flickering security light by the entrance. This is me, I said unnecessarily, reaching for the door handle. Wait. His hand covered mine, warm and surprisingly gentle. My card. Did you keep it? I nodded, patting my coat pocket where I'd tucked the envelope. Good, use it if you need anything at all. There was an emphasis to his words that suggested more than a casual offer of assistance. I mean that, Emma. Thank you for the ride, Mr. Vargo, I said, carefully extracting my hand from beneath his. Luca, he corrected, leaning back slightly. I'll see you again soon. It wasn't a question, and the certainty in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. Not entirely from fear. One of his men had already exited the car and was holding my door open. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, murmuring a thank you that he didn't acknowledge. As I walked toward my building entrance, I could feel Luca watching me. Only when I'd unlocked the security door and stepped inside did I hear the car pull away. My third-floor walk-up felt particularly small and shabby that night after the luxury of Luca Vargo's world. I moved on autopilot, hanging my coat, washing my face, changing into worn pajamas. As I collapsed onto my second-hand couch, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. I pulled out the envelope Mr. Delaney had given me, fanning the cash with disbelief. There was enough here to cover next month's rent and make a dent in Mom's medical bills. The business card felt even heavier now. Simple black embossed numbers on thick cream cardstock. No name needed. Anyone who received this card would know exactly who it belonged to. I set it on my coffee table and stared at it as if it might suddenly speak and explain what had happened tonight. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart jumped to my throat as I read. Home safe, I trust. Sleep well, Emma. How had he gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him. The realization that Luca Vargo could so easily access my personal information should have terrified me. But instead, I felt a confusing mix of fear and intrigue. I didn't respond to the text, but I didn't block the number either. That night, I dreamed of amber eyes and gentle hands with dangerous intentions. The next day passed in a blur of mundane tasks. I visited my mother at the assisted living facility, where she'd been since her stroke 2 years ago. The place was clean, but institutional, with the perpetual scent of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. Mom was having a good day. She recognized me immediately, and even remembered some details from my last visit. I didn't tell her about Luca Vargo or the generous tip. Instead, I shared funny stories about regular customers and promised to bring her favorite cookies next time. As I left the facility, my phone buzzed again. How is your mother today? I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, causing a businessman to swerve around me with an annoyed grunt. How did he know where I was? More importantly, how did he know about my mother? A black sedan was parked across the street, and though I couldn't see through the tinted windows, I knew someone was watching me. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed, "Are you having me followed?" The response came immediately, protection, not surveillance. There's a difference. I looked around, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. I didn't ask for protection, I texted back. Need and request are not always aligned. We'll speak more tonight. Tonight? I had no plans to see Luca Vargo tonight. I was scheduled to work, and while he knew my schedule, There was no guarantee he would come to Vermilion. Unless he meant after my shift, which sent another shiver of apprehension down my spine. I tucked my phone away and continued toward the T-station, hyper-aware of every person who passed too close or looked at me for too long. By the time I reached my apartment to change for work, I felt like my nerves were frayed at the edges. Vermilion was unusually busy for a Tuesday night. A private event in the back room had the kitchen in a frenzy, and the regular dining room was fully booked. I moved through my shift in a state of heightened awareness, half expecting to see Luca walk through the door at any moment. But as the hours passed and he didn't appear, I began to relax slightly, focusing on my tables and the rhythm of service. Just after 10, as the dinner rush was finally slowing, Mr. Delaney approached me with an envelope. "This was delivered for you," he said, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Inside was a small note card with an address in the South End and instructions to come after my shift ended. It was signed simply L. No explanation, no context. Just an expectation of compliance. "Who delivered this?" I asked, turning the envelope over as if it might contain additional clues. "One of Mr. Vargo's associates," Mr. Delaney replied, lowering his voice. "Emma, I don't know what's happening between you and him, but—" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Be careful. The Vargos aren't people to be taken lightly." "Nothing's happening," I insisted, though the envelope in my hands suggested otherwise. "I barely know him." Mr. Delaney's expression was doubtful, but he merely nodded and returned to his duties, leaving me with a decision to make. I could ignore the summons, pretend I never received it, or claim I was too tired after my shift. But something told me Luca Vargo wasn't a man accustomed to being ignored, and I wasn't sure what the consequences might be. More than that, though, was the undeniable curiosity burning inside me. Why me? What did he want? The questions had been circling in my mind since our encounter the previous night. By the time my shift ended, I had made my decision. I changed from my server uniform into the simple black dress and cardigan I kept in my locker for emergencies, applied a touch of lip gloss, and combed my fingers through my hair. In the staff bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were too bright, my cheeks flushed with nervous anticipation. "This is insane," I whispered to my reflection. "You don't even know what he wants." But I went anyway, taking a cab to the address in the South End. The driver gave me a curious look when I provided the destination, but said nothing. As we pulled up to a converted factory building with elegant floor-to-ceiling windows and a discreet entrance, I understood why. This was one of the most exclusive residential buildings in Boston, rumored to house celebrities and business magnates who valued privacy and security. A doorman in an immaculate uniform opened the cab door for me. "Ms. Collins?" he inquired. I nodded, surprised he knew my name. "Mr. Vargo is expecting you. Penthouse." He gestured toward private elevators at the back of the marble-floored lobby. The elevator required a key card, which the doorman provided, accompanying me inside and inserting it into a slot before pressing the button marked P and exiting with a small bow. As the doors closed and the elevator began its smooth ascent, I caught a glimpse of my anxious expression in the mirrored walls. What was I doing here? I barely knew this man, yet here I was, going to his penthouse in the middle of the night. Everything I'd heard about Luca Vargo suggested danger. He wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in ways that operated outside the law, and now, for reasons I couldn't comprehend, his attention was focused on me. The elevator opened directly into a foyer with soaring ceilings and walls of glass that showcased the glittering Boston skyline. The space was minimalist but luxurious, all clean lines, rich textures, and subtle lighting that created an atmosphere of intimate sophistication. "Emma." Luca's voice came from my right, where he stood in the entrance to what appeared to be a living room. He'd changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a charcoal cashmere sweater that somehow made him look both more relaxed and more dangerous. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his amber eyes, amusement perhaps. "We always have choices, Emma, though some come with more consequences than others." He gestured for me to follow him into the living room, a vast space dominated by a wall of windows and anchored by low-slung Italian furniture in shades of cream and gray. A fire burned in a minimalist hearth, casting dancing shadows across the polished concrete floors. "Wine?" he offered, moving to a bar area where an already open bottle of red wine breathed beside 2 crystal glasses. "No, thank you," I replied, remaining standing even as he indicated a seating area. "I'd like to know why I'm here." Luca studied me for a moment, then set down the wine bottle, direct again. "I told you I appreciated that quality." He moved closer, his movements fluid and controlled. "You're here because I wanted to see you, to speak with you properly, away from the restaurant." "About what?" I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth from the fire. "About possibilities," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "About an opportunity I'd like to offer you." "What kind of opportunity?" Suspicion colored my tone. "A job," he replied simply. "One that pays considerably better than serving tables and would allow you to complete your nursing degree." I stared at him, shock momentarily robbing me of speech. "A job," I repeated finally. "Doing what, exactly?" "Being a companion to my grandmother." He indicated for me to sit, and this time I did, perching on the edge of an armchair, while he took a seat on the sofa across from me. "She's 92, still sharp mentally, but increasingly frail physically. She refuses to move from her home in the North End and rejects most professional caregivers I've hired. But she needs someone with her, someone intelligent, observant, and studying to be a nurse." Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this was nowhere on the list. "Why me?" "You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think," he said, his gaze steady. "I know you're 24 years old. I know you left nursing school 2 years ago when your mother had a stroke, and you've been working double shifts ever since to cover her care and your rent. I know you send her flowers on the 1st of every month, regardless of how tight money is. I know you're intelligent, hardworking, and discreet." My mouth went dry. "How do you know all that?" "It's my business to know things about people who interest me." His tone suggested this was perfectly reasonable. "What matters is that my grandmother needs someone, and I believe you'd be suitable." "And what would this job entail exactly?" I asked, still wary but increasingly curious. "Living in her guest room, helping with medications, doctor's appointments, and daily activities, providing companionship. She's lonely, though she'd never admit it." For the first time, I saw something softer in his expression. Genuine concern, perhaps even love. "In return, you'd receive a salary that would cover your mother's care at a better facility, completion of your nursing degree, and a generous stipend." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "And what do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Vargo?" "Luca," he corrected automatically. "Peace of mind regarding my grandmother's welfare. And," he paused, studying me with that intense amber gaze, "the satisfaction of knowing you're in a safer neighborhood, under my protection." "Your protection," I repeated, a chill running down my spine despite the warmth of the room. "I don't understand why you'd offer this to a complete stranger." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "You remind me of someone I once knew. Someone kind who helped my family when we had nothing." His voice had dropped lower, revealing a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "Considerate, repaying a debt to the universe." I didn't believe him. Not entirely. There was something else, something he wasn't telling me, but the offer itself was tempting, more than tempting. It was a lifeline. Mom could move to one of the better facilities we'd toured but couldn't afford. I could finish my degree. I could stop working 60-hour weeks just to stay afloat. "I need time to think about it," I said finally. Luca nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Of course, but don't take too long. My grandmother's current caregiver leaves at the end of the week." He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. "My driver will take you home." As if on cue, the elevator doors opened, revealing one of the men who had accompanied him at the restaurant. I rose from the chair, feeling strangely like I'd passed some sort of test I hadn't known I was taking. At the elevator, Luca gently caught my wrist. "One more thing, Emma." His thumb brushed over my pulse point, surely feeling the way it quickened at his touch. "If you accept, you'll be under my family's protection. That means certain adjustments to your life, for your safety." The way he said protection made it sound both like a privilege and a constraint. "What kind of adjustments?" We can discuss those details if you decide to accept. He released my wrist, his fingers trailing lightly across my skin. Sleep well, Emma. I'll await your decision. As the elevator doors closed between us, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The ride down gave me a moment to collect my thoughts, but they remained jumbled and conflicted. The offer was incredible, life-changing even, but it would tie me to Luca Vargo and whatever darkness surrounded him. The same driver from the previous night was waiting in the lobby. He didn't speak as he escorted me to the car and drove me home, maintaining a professional distance that somehow felt more ominous than reassuring. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, mentally exhausted. The business card still sat on my coffee table, the numbers seeming to taunt me. A job offer that would solve all my financial problems, from a dangerous man who, for reasons I couldn't fathom, had taken an interest in me. As I finally drifted toward sleep, one thought circled in my mind. Whatever Luca Vargo's true motivations were, I was already in too deep to simply walk away. Morning light filtered through my thin curtains, waking me from a restless sleep filled with fragmented dreams of amber eyes and whispered promises. I rubbed my face, trying to clear the fog from my mind as the events of the previous night came rushing back. Luca Vargo's unexpected job offer hung in the air like a tantalizing mirage, too perfect, too convenient, and almost certainly concealing something beneath its gleaming surface. I had the day off from the restaurant, which gave me time to think. After a quick shower and a cup of coffee that did little to settle my nerves, I called the only person who might offer objective advice. "You're up early," my best friend Mia answered, her voice still husky with sleep. "Everything okay?" "I need to talk to you," I said. "In person. Can we meet for coffee?" 2 hours later, we sat in a corner booth at a cafe far from both Vermilion and the South End, where I'd be less likely to encounter anyone connected to Luca. Mia listened with widening eyes as I recounted the events of the past 2 days, interrupting occasionally with gasps or questions. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finally finished. "Luca Vargo, yes, that Luca Vargo, has offered you a job as his grandmother's companion, with a salary that would solve all your financial problems?" I nodded, wrapping my hands around my mug for warmth. "It sounds insane when you say it out loud." "Because it is insane, Em," Mia leaned forward, lowering her voice. "The Vargos aren't just rich people, they're dangerous. My cousin works at the DA's office, and he says they suspect Luca of being involved in everything from racketeering to—" She glanced around and whispered even lower, "Worse things. They just can't prove it." "I know," I admitted, staring into my coffee. "But you should see the place where Mom is now, Mia. The staff tries, but they're overworked, and she doesn't get the attention she needs. With this money, I could move her somewhere better. I could finish school." Mia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I understand, but there has to be a catch. Men like him don't just hand out dream jobs to random servers." "That's what I keep telling myself," I sighed, pulling my hand back to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "But what if there isn't a catch? What if it's exactly what he said? He needs someone for his grandmother. And I fit the bill." "Then I'm the Queen of England," Mia retorted with an eye roll. "He said you reminded him of someone." "Who?" He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. I bit my lip, remembering the intensity in Luca's eyes when he'd mentioned the woman from his past. Whoever she was, she clearly meant something to him. Or it's a line he uses to manipulate people. Mia's skepticism was palpable. "Have you Googled his grandmother? Does she even exist?" I felt a flash of annoyance at Mia's doubt, then immediately chastised myself. Of course she was being protective. That's what friends did. I tried, but there's not much online about the Vargo family beyond business news and the occasional society page mention. I found a reference to an Elisabetta Vargo who came from Italy with Luca's grandfather in the 1950s, but that's it. So she might be real. Mia sipped her latte, looking thoughtful. "But that still doesn't explain why he's fixated on you specifically." "I don't know," I admitted. "When he looks at me, it's like—" I trailed off, unsure how to describe the sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. "Like what?" Mia prompted. "Like he sees something in me that even I don't see." The word sounded ridiculous once spoken, And I quickly added, or maybe I'm just romanticizing a dangerous situation because I'm desperate for a solution to my problems. Mia's expression softened. Oh, Em, I know how hard things have been. I just don't want to see you get hurt. Or worse. I know. I stared out the window at the pedestrians hurrying past, each absorbed in their own lives, their own problems. How many of them were one decision away from changing their fate? I have until the end of the week to decide. Just promise me you'll be careful, and if you do take this job, we're setting up daily check-ins. If you miss even one, I'm calling the police. I managed a smile, grateful for her concern. Deal. After parting ways with Mia, I found myself walking aimlessly through the city, my mind churning with indecision. I passed a flower shop and impulsively bought a small bouquet for Mom, with part of Luca's generous tip, then headed to the assisted living facility. The familiar scent of institutional cleanliness hit me as I entered, but today it seemed more depressing than usual. The fluorescent lighting cast a sickly glow on walls painted in what was supposed to be a cheerful yellow, but had faded to the color of old mustard. A television blared in the common room, though no one seemed to be watching it. Emma, the receptionist greeted me with genuine warmth. Twice in 2 days. Your mom will be thrilled. I smiled and signed in, then made my way to Mom's room. She was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, gazing out at the small courtyard where a few residents were bundled up against the cold, determined to get some fresh air. Hey, Mom, I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her face lighting up in recognition. Emma. What a lovely surprise. Her words were slightly slurred from the stroke, but her eyes were clear today. I brought you these. I handed her the flowers, which she accepted with childlike delight. They're beautiful. Let's put them right here. She gestured to the windowsill, where the light could catch them. I found a plastic cup to serve as a vase and arranged the flowers while Mom watched with a smile that reminded me of happier times, before illness had stolen so much from her. How are you feeling today? I asked, pulling a chair close to her wheelchair. Oh, the same. Betty, you know, the night nurse with the red hair, she helped me wash my hair yesterday. Mom patted her silver-streaked brown hair, which did look cleaner than usual. Tell me about your life, darling. Any handsome men I should know about? I laughed, the sound catching in my throat. If only she knew. Nothing exciting, I lied, unwilling to burden her with the truth. Just work and sleep, mostly. She studied my face with the perceptiveness that even her illness couldn't diminish. You look tired, sweetheart. Are you taking care of yourself? I'm fine, Mom. Just busy. I reached for her hand, noticing how thin and fragile it felt in mine. She'd once been so vibrant, so full of energy, a nurse who worked long shifts yet still found time to bake cookies and help with homework. Now she depended on overworked staff for her most basic needs. The injustice of it made my chest ache. We spent an hour together, me reading aloud from her favorite mystery novel while she drifted in and out of attention. Sometimes she'd interrupt with a question about a character we'd met chapters ago. Other times, she'd slip into memories, talking about events from my childhood as if they'd happened yesterday. I played along, knowing these moments of connection were precious. As I prepared to leave, promising to return in a few days, Mom caught my hand again. Emma, she said, her voice suddenly clearer than it had been all day. I worry about you, all alone in that apartment, working so hard. Her eyes, so like my own, filled with tears. I never wanted this life for you. I know, Mom. I leaned down to kiss her forehead, blinking back my own tears. It's temporary. Things will get better. Her expression turned determined, a flash of the strong woman she'd once been. You deserve happiness, Emma. Promise me you'll remember that. I promise, I whispered, though happiness felt like a distant concept, something that belonged to other people with simpler lives. As I left the facility, my decision crystallized with each step. Whatever Luca Vargo's true motives, his offer represented a chance to give Mom the care she deserved and reclaim some semblance of the future I'd once planned. The risks were real, potentially serious, but staying in my current situation meant watching Mom fade away in that depressing facility while I worked myself to exhaustion just to stay afloat. I pulled out my phone and the business card I now carried everywhere, dialing the number with shaking fingers. It rang only once before Luca answered, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Emma," he said, my name sounding different in his voice, almost like a caress. "Have you made your decision?" "I have conditions," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. A pause, then what sounded like a suppressed chuckle. "I'm listening. I want a formal employment contract that specifies my duties, hours, and compensation. I want my mother moved to Lakeside Manor in Cambridge. They have an excellent stroke recovery program. And I want to be able to continue my nursing classes." "Reasonable requests," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Anything else?" I took a deep breath, adding the condition Mia had insisted upon. I maintain my own life outside of work. No surveillance, no protection unless there's a specific threat. This time the pause was longer. "I can agree to most of that," he finally said. "But your safety isn't negotiable, Emma. You'll be associated with my family, which carries certain risks. The protection stays, though I'll ensure it's discreet." I considered arguing, but sensed it would be futile. "Fine, but no interfering in my personal relationships." Agreed, with one caveat. I reserve the right to vet anyone who comes into close contact with my grandmother for her safety. It was a reasonable boundary, even if something in his tone suggested there was more to it. When would I start? "Tomorrow, if possible. I can have a car pick you up in the morning to meet Nonna. If she approves, and I believe she will, you can move in this weekend." The suddenness of it made me dizzy. "So soon?" "As I mentioned, her current caregiver leaves at the end of the week. Besides," his voice dropped lower, "why wait to improve both your situations?" He had a point. Every day Mom spent in her current facility was a day too many. "All right. Tomorrow morning, then." "Excellent. My driver will collect you at 9. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had that same intense quality I'd heard in his penthouse. "You won't regret this decision, Emma. I promise you that." We ended the call, and I stood on the sidewalk, phone clutched in my hand, wondering if I'd just made the best decision of my life or the worst. That night, I packed a small overnight bag with essentials, just in case Luca's grandmother approved of me and wanted me to stay immediately. I tried to imagine what this woman would be like. Probably intimidating, given who her grandson was, but possibly fragile too, given her age. Would she see through whatever scheme Luca might be running? Would she even care? Sleep eluded me as questions circled in my mind. By morning, I was exhausted, but resolute. At precisely 9 o'clock, a text arrived informing me that the car was waiting downstairs. I grabbed my bag, took one last look at my shabby apartment, and headed out. The same silent driver from before held the car door open for me. This time, to my surprise, Luca wasn't inside. I was both relieved and strangely disappointed as we drove toward the North End, Boston's historic Italian neighborhood. We stopped in front of a narrow brick townhouse on a quiet, cobblestone street. Unlike the surrounding buildings that had been modernized over the years, this one maintained its old-world charm, with window boxes, empty now in winter, and heavy wooden shutters. The driver escorted me to the door, which opened before we could knock. A stern-faced man in his 50s stood in the entrance, eyeing me with open suspicion. "Ms. Collins," he said, his accent distinctly Italian. "I am Paolo, Mrs. Vargo's house manager." He stepped aside, allowing me to enter. "She is expecting you in the garden room." I followed him through a foyer decorated with antique furniture and oil paintings of Italian landscapes, then down a hallway lined with photographs. I slowed my pace, drawn to the family history displayed on the walls. Most were in black and white, a young couple on their wedding day, the same couple with a small child, then teenagers, then a family group that must have spanned several generations. Near the end of the hall hung a color photograph that stopped me in my tracks. A younger Luca, perhaps in his late teens, stood beside an elderly woman whose regal bearing was unmistakable despite her small stature. But what caught my attention was the young woman on the elderly woman's other side, a girl with chestnut hair and a gentle smile, who could have been my sister. The resemblance was so striking. "That is the signora with her grandson and Adriana," Paolo said, noticing my attention to the photo. His voice softened slightly. Adriana was like a granddaughter to her, before the accident. Accident, I echoed, unable to tear my eyes from the familiar yet strange face. Paolo's expression closed. It is not my place to discuss. The signora is waiting. He led me through double doors into a bright space at the back of the house. The garden room, apparently named for the wall of windows overlooking a small but immaculately maintained Italian garden, dormant now in winter, but still beautiful with its structured pathways and stone sculptures. Seated in a high-backed chair near the windows was a tiny woman with silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon. Despite her advanced age, she sat perfectly straight, dressed in a simple but clearly expensive navy dress, a strand of pearls at her throat, sharp dark eyes, so like Luca's in their intelligence and intensity, assessed me as I entered. "So," she said, her Italian accent much thicker than Paolo's, "you are the girl my grandson has sent to babysit me." I straightened my shoulders, instinctively recognizing that this woman would respect strength, not deference. "I'm Emma Collins, Mrs. Vargo. And I was told I would be a companion, not a babysitter." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Companion?" she repeated. A pretty word for the same thing. She gestured to a chair across from hers. "Sit. Let me look at you properly." I complied, setting my overnight bag beside the chair. Up close, I could see that her eyes were actually a deep amber, just like Luca's, a genetic trait passed down through generations. "Your family is from Ireland originally, yes?" she asked, studying my face. I nodded, surprised. "My great-grandparents immigrated to Boston from Cork. I can see it in the eyes, that particular shade of green." She continued to examine me with unnerving intensity. "Luca tells me you are studying to be a nurse." "Yes, ma'am. I had to take a break from my studies due to family circumstances, but I plan to continue." "Family circumstances," she repeated thoughtfully. "Your mother's illness." "A stroke," Luca said. I shifted uncomfortably, unnerved by how much she knew about me. "Yes, 2 years ago." "And you left school to care for her. Admirable." Her gaze never wavered. "In my day, family always came first. Now people put their parents in homes and visit on holidays, if that." She tilted her head slightly. "Yet you visit your mother several times a week despite working long hours. Why?" The question seemed like a test, though I wasn't sure what answer she sought. I decided on honesty, because she'd do the same for me. She did everything for me when I was growing up, worked extra shifts, went without things she needed. Now it's my turn to take care of her. Elisabetta Vargo nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something she already suspected. "Loyalty," she said, "is the most valuable quality a person can possess. More precious than beauty, more useful than intelligence." She reached for a small silver bell on the table beside her and rang it once. Paolo appeared almost instantly. "Tea," she commanded, and he disappeared again with a slight bow. "Do you know why you're here, Ms. Collins?" she asked, returning her attention to me. "Luca said you need a companion, someone to help with medications, appointments, and daily activities." "And you believed that was his only reason for selecting you?" Her tone suggested I was either naive or being deliberately obtuse. I met her gaze directly. "No. I think there's something he's not telling me." "Something to do with Adriana, perhaps?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face, before her expression became impassive again. "You saw the photograph?" "Yes. The resemblance is noticeable." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently touching her pearl necklace. "Adriana was like family to us. She worked for me much as you are being asked to do while studying medicine. She and Luca were close." The way she hesitated on the word close suggested more than friendship, confirming my suspicions. "What happened to her?" "A car accident 5 years ago." Her voice remained steady, but grief shadowed her eyes. "She died instantly, they said." I swallowed hard, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "I'm sorry. But if you're worried I might remind Luca of her too much—" "It is precisely because you remind him of her that you are here," she interrupted. "But not in the way you imagine. Luca does not seek to replace Adriana with a look-alike. He seeks to protect you from her fate." Confusion must have shown on my face because she continued, "Adriana's accident was no accident. It was meant for me, or possibly for Luca. She took the wrong car that night, in a hurry to reach a patient. The implications sent a chill through me. You're saying she was murdered because of her connection to your family? Elisabetta's gaze was unwavering. In our world, Ms. Collins, connections can be dangerous things. Adriana paid the price for ours. Paolo returned with a tea tray, momentarily halting our conversation. He served us both, then retreated to a discreet position by the door. I don't understand, I said, once we were relatively alone again. If being connected to your family is so dangerous, why would Luca deliberately bring me into it? Because he believes you are already in danger, whether you realize it or not. She sipped her tea calmly, as if discussing the weather rather than potential murder. The men responsible for Adriana's death have returned to Boston, and they have noticed you. Noticed me? I set my teacup down with a clatter, tea sloshing over the rim. Why would they notice me? For the same reason my grandson did. Your resemblance to Adriana is striking. They may believe you are connected to us already, perhaps a relative of hers. She set her own cup down with perfect control. Or they may simply see an opportunity to strike at Luca through someone he has shown interest in. My mind raced, trying to process this new information. So this job offer is genuine, she interrupted. I do need assistance, and you are qualified to provide it. But it also serves another purpose, keeping you safe, under our protection. I didn't ask for protection, I said, echoing the text I'd sent Luca. Few do, she replied. Until it is too late. The revelation hung in the air between us, altering everything I thought I knew about Luca's offer. If Elisabetta was telling the truth, this wasn't about a job, or even about my resemblance to a dead woman. It was about keeping me alive. Why didn't Luca tell me this himself? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Elisabetta's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. My grandson believes in shielding people from unpleasant truths. He thought you would refuse if you knew the real danger. She studied me over the rim of her teacup. Would you have? The question caught me off guard. Would I have run in the opposite direction if Luca had been honest about the threat? Probably. But now, sitting across from his grandmother, I felt strangely calm, as if some part of me had suspected there was more to his interest all along. I don't know, I answered honestly. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my response. Luca sees himself as a protector. It is both his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness, because it makes him vulnerable, I surmised. Precisely. Appreciation flickered in her amber eyes. You understand more than you realize, Emma Collins. Paolo stepped forward, murmuring something to Elisabetta in rapid Italian. She replied with a brief nod, then turned back to me. It appears my grandson has arrived. Earlier than expected. There was a hint of amusement in her tone. He is eager to hear my assessment of you. As if on cue, the door opened, and Luca entered the garden room. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his copper hair catching the winter sunlight streaming through the windows. His eyes found me immediately, his expression unreadable as he crossed to kiss his grandmother's cheek. Nonna, he greeted her in Italian before switching to English. I see you've met Emma. We have had a most illuminating conversation, Elisabetta replied, her gaze moving between us with undisguised interest. She will do nicely. Luca's shoulders relaxed slightly, the first indication that he'd been tense about this meeting. I'm glad to hear it, he turned to me. Has my grandmother explained the position to your satisfaction? She's explained many things, I said carefully, watching his reaction. His eyes narrowed slightly as they moved from me to Elisabetta. I see. Some unspoken communication passed between them before he addressed me again. Then you understand the urgency of the situation. I understand that you believe I'm in danger because I resemble someone named Adriana, who was killed in what you think was a targeted attack meant for your family. I held his gaze, challenging him to deny it. What I don't understand is why you didn't tell me this yourself. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Would you have believed me? Or would you have dismissed it as the paranoid ravings of a man you've been taught to fear? You didn't give me the chance to decide that for myself, I countered. No, I didn't, His voice softened unexpectedly. For that, I apologize. I thought offering protection without explanation would be simpler. Simpler for whom? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. For both of us, I had hoped. He glanced at his grandmother, who was watching our exchange with undisguised fascination. But it seems Nonna had other ideas. The girl deserves truth, Luca, Elisabetta said firmly. If she is to live under our protection, she must understand why it is necessary. He inclined his head, acknowledging her point. And now that you know, Emma, what is your decision? Both Vargos watched me intently, awaiting my response. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. Whatever I decided now would irrevocably change the course of my life. If they were telling the truth, refusing their protection could put me in genuine danger. But accepting meant binding myself to a family whose power stemmed from activities I could only guess at. I need to think, I said finally. This is a lot to process. Luca nodded, his expression grave. Of course. But I must ask that you remain here while you consider, for your safety. It wasn't really a request, despite his phrasing. For how long? Until we've neutralized the threat, he replied, his tone matter of fact, as if discussing a business transaction rather than what sounded suspiciously like murder. Alarm must have shown on my face because Elisabetta interjected. What my grandson means is that steps are being taken to ensure those who would harm us, and by extension you, are discouraged from doing so. Discouraged, I repeated, the euphemism doing little to soften the implication. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, Luca suggested, glancing at Paolo, who remained by the door. Nonna, if you'll excuse us? Of course. Elisabetta waved a hand dismissively. Paolo will show Emma to the guest room later. I expect you both for dinner at 7. Her tone made it clear this was a command, not an invitation. Luca offered his hand to help me up, which I accepted after a moment's hesitation. His touch was warm, his grip firm but gentle as he led me from the garden room, through the hallway with its haunting photographs, and into what appeared to be a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, interspersed with more family photos and what looked like valuable antiques. He closed the door behind us, then moved to a small bar cart in the corner. Drink? He offered, holding up a crystal decanter. I shook my head. It's not even noon. Sometimes circumstances warrant exceptions. He poured a small measure of amber liquid into a glass for himself, then turned to face me. Ask me what you want to know, Emma. No more half-truths. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. Who exactly is threatening your family? And why would they target me? Luca took a sip of his drink before answering. The Castellanos, a rival family from Chicago who've been trying to expand into Boston for years. My father kept them at bay, but when I took over, he trailed off, a shadow crossing his face. They saw an opportunity to test the new leadership. Your father's mysterious disappearance, I quoted, remembering the gossip among Vermilion's staff. His expression hardened. My father was murdered by Vittorio Castellano's men, though it was made to look like an accident, just like Adriana. The raw pain in his voice was unmistakable, and I believed him, despite myself. I'm sorry, I said quietly. But that doesn't explain why they'd target me. Doesn't it? Luca set his glass down and moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach. You bear an uncanny resemblance to a woman who was important to me. The Castellanos are back in Boston, making moves, watching me. They would have noticed my interest in you at Vermilion. For them, that's reason enough. But we've only just met, I protested. I served your table once. How could they possibly think I'm important to you? A curious expression crossed his face, something almost like tenderness. Because I made it obvious, Emma. I silenced Salvatore for asking you to smile. I had you brought to my table. I sent a car for you. In my world, those actions speak volumes. I stared at him, a cold realization dawning. So you put a target on my back. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I didn't anticipate they would move so quickly. But when my men reported Castellano's people watching your apartment building the night after we met, I knew I had to act. His eyes held mine, intense and apologetic. I never meant to endanger you. But you did, I said, anger finally breaking through my shock. You dragged me into whatever war you're fighting without my knowledge or consent. Yes. He didn't try to deny it. And now I'm trying to protect you from the consequences of my actions by essentially keeping me prisoner here? I gestured around the study. Not a prisoner, he countered. A guest. Under protection. There's a difference. Is there? I challenged. If I wanted to walk out that door right now, would you stop me? Luca was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. I would try to convince you to stay, he finally said. But I wouldn't force you, Emma. I'm not that man. Something in his tone made me believe him, despite everything. What about my mother? Is she in danger too? We've arranged additional security at her facility, he assured me. Discreet, but effective. And if you accept my offer, we can move her to Lakeside Manor as discussed, where my people can monitor her more easily. The mention of Mom brought me back to reality, to the practical concerns that had drawn me to Luca's offer in the first place. Whatever danger I might face here, it was worth it if it meant giving her better care, finishing my degree, creating some semblance of the future we'd planned together before her stroke. If I stay, I said slowly, I want to see her, regularly, and I want to continue my nursing classes. Relief washed over his face. Of course. We'll arrange secure transportation for both. You'll have as normal a life as possible under the circumstances. And how long will these circumstances last? I asked. How long until I can go back to my own life? Luca's expression grew somber. I don't know. Until we resolve the situation with the Castellanos. It could be weeks. It could be months. Months, I echoed. The reality of what I was agreeing to finally sinking in. And in the meantime, I just live here? Take care of your grandmother? Pretend everything is normal? Is that so terrible? He asked quietly. Compared to the alternative being potential death at the hands of his enemies, or continuing to struggle financially while Mom received inadequate care. Neither option seemed appealing. I'll stay, I decided, the words feeling both like surrender and relief. For now, but I want regular updates on the situation. No more secrets. Luca nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Agreed. Thank you, Emma. The simple gratitude in his voice seemed genuine. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Paolo entered after Luca called permission, his expression as impassive as ever. Signore, the signora asks if Ms. Collins will be staying, so she may instruct Rosa to prepare the room properly. Luca looked to me for confirmation. I nodded, still not entirely sure I was making the right decision, but committed now nonetheless. Yes, Paolo. Please tell my grandmother that Ms. Collins has agreed to stay. Have Rosa prepare the east bedroom, the one with the garden view. Paolo bowed slightly. Very good, signore. And Mr. Ricci has arrived with the items you requested. Send him up in 10 minutes, Luca instructed, before turning back to me as Paolo left. I took the liberty of having some of your belongings brought here. Clothes, personal items. My man Ricci is very discreet. The fact that he'd anticipated my decision and already sent someone to pack my things should have angered me, but I was too exhausted to muster more outrage. Of course you did, I said flatly. Luca moved closer, stopping just before me. Emma, he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know I've disrupted your life in ways you never asked for, but I promise you this. I will keep you safe, and when this is over, you'll be free to choose your own path. There was such sincerity in his amber eyes that I found myself wanting to believe him, despite everything. I'll hold you to that, I said quietly. A small smile touched his lips. I would expect nothing less. The rest of the day passed in a blur of strange new routines. The east bedroom turned out to be a lovely space with windows overlooking the winter garden, furnished with antiques that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined. Rosa, the housekeeper, showed me where everything was kept and explained the household schedule with military precision. Luca disappeared after our conversation in the study, called away by business that no one specified but that I could guess had something to do with the Castellanos. I spent the afternoon with Elisabetta, who insisted on giving me a detailed tour of the house, pointing out family heirlooms and telling stories of the old country that revealed both a sharp memory and a wicked sense of humor I hadn't expected. By the time we gathered for dinner at 7, I'd begun to adjust to my new reality, if not fully accept it. The dining room was formal but intimate, with a table that could seat 12 but was set for only 3. Crystal glasses and fine china gleamed under a chandelier that cast a warm glow over everything. Luca arrived precisely on time, having changed from his business suit into more casual trousers and a cashmere sweater that reminded me of the night in his penthouse. He greeted his grandmother with obvious affection, then turned to me with a smile that seemed almost shy, so at odds with the powerful, dangerous man I knew him to be. "You look rested," he observed as we took our seats. "Your grandmother is an excellent hostess," I replied diplomatically. "She's made me feel very welcome." "Humph," Elisabetta interjected. "The girl is being kind. I have interrogated her thoroughly all afternoon." She fixed her sharp gaze on Luca. "She will do well here. She has spirit." Luca's smile widened. I never doubted it. Dinner was served by Paolo and Rosa, course after course of traditional Italian dishes that outshone anything I'd ever tasted at Vermilion. Conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, with Elisabetta dominating much of it, sharing family stories and asking me questions about my nursing studies that showed genuine interest. It was almost possible to forget why I was really there, until Paolo entered with a message that he delivered to Luca in hushed Italian. Luca's expression darkened immediately, his jaw tightening as he excused himself from the table. "Is everything all right?" I asked Elisabetta after he'd left. She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 92 years. "Business," she said simply. "It never ends." When Luca returned 10 minutes later, his expression was carefully neutral, but I could sense the tension radiating from him. "My apologies for the interruption," he said smoothly, reclaiming his seat. The meal continued, but the easy atmosphere had evaporated. Luca participated in the conversation, but his mind was clearly elsewhere, his responses slightly delayed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. After dessert, a delicate panna cotta with fresh berries, Elisabetta announced she was tired and would retire for the evening. Luca helped her from her chair with gentle deference, kissing her cheek as she bid us good night. "Walk with me?" he asked me once she had left, escorted by Rosa. I nodded, curious despite my better judgment. He led me through the house to a small private courtyard at the side, sheltered from the winter wind by high brick walls. Heat lamps had been turned on, making the space surprisingly comfortable despite the season. We sat on a stone bench beside a dormant fountain. "What happened at dinner?" I asked directly. "The message Paolo brought." Luca was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "The Castellanos made a move tonight." "Nothing that affects your situation," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Business territories." "You mean illegal business," I clarified, not bothering to phrase it as a question. He studied me for a long moment. "Does it matter to you? The legality?" "Shouldn't it?" I countered. "Perhaps," he conceded, "but the lines aren't as clear as most people believe. The businesses my family controls provide jobs, security, order. The law doesn't always recognize the necessity of certain arrangements." "That sounds like justification," I observed. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "It probably is. But it's also the truth as I see it." He leaned back slightly, his gaze still fixed on me. "Judge me if you must, Emma, but know that everything I do is to protect what's mine." The possessive edge to his words sent a shiver through me that wasn't entirely from fear. "And what exactly is yours, Luca?" "My family, my territory, my people." His eyes never left mine. "And now, whether you chose it or not, you're under my protection too. That makes you mine to defend. I'm not a possession," I said firmly, meeting his intense gaze. "No," he agreed, surprising me. "You're much more complicated than that." Before I could ask what he meant, he changed the subject. "Your mother's transfer to Lakeside Manor has been arranged for tomorrow. I've spoken with the director personally. She'll have the best care available." Gratitude washed over me, momentarily displacing my wariness. "Thank you. That means everything to me." "I know." His voice softened. Family is everything, Emma. It's perhaps the one thing we truly understand the same way. In that moment, sitting beside him in the quiet courtyard, I glimpsed another side of Luca Vargo. Not just the dangerous mafia boss or the commanding businessman, but a man bound by loyalty and love for his family. It didn't erase the darker aspects of who he was, but it made him more complex, more human. "It's getting late," I said finally, uncomfortable with the direction of my thoughts. "I should get some rest." He nodded, rising to escort me back inside. At the foot of the grand staircase that led to the bedrooms, he paused. "Sleep well, Emma. Tomorrow will be a new beginning for both of us, I think." "What do you mean?" I asked, one foot on the first stair. Luca's expression was unreadable in the dim light of the hallway. "Things are in motion now. Changes that can't be undone." "You're being cryptic again," I pointed out. A genuine smile curved his lips. "So I am. Forgive me. Old habits." He took my hand unexpectedly, raising it to his lips in an old-world gesture that should have seemed theatrical, but instead sent warmth spreading up my arm. "Good night, Emma." "Good night, Luca," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt as I climbed the stairs, aware of his gaze following me until I disappeared from view. In my new bedroom, I changed into silk pajamas that had appeared in the wardrobe, designer items with tags still attached in exactly my size. Another presumption that should have angered me, but instead left me feeling oddly cared for. As I slid between sheets that probably cost more than a month's rent at my old apartment, I tried to make sense of the day's revelations. I'd gone from server to protected witness in less than 48 hours, all because I resembled a dead woman who'd meant something to a man who now controlled my fate. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. My personal phone that I'd brought with me, not a new one provided by Luca. A text from Mia. "Haven't heard from you. Everything okay with the job offer?" I hesitated, unsure what to say or how much I could safely share. Finally, I typed, "Yes. Took the job, staying at his grandmother's house. Will call you tomorrow with details." Her response came quickly. "His grandmother's house? That's unexpected. Stay safe and check in daily as promised." I smiled at her concern, typing back an assurance before setting the phone aside. The ceiling above me was painted with delicate vines and flowers, probably centuries old, imported from some Italian villa, so different from the water-stained acoustic tiles of my apartment. Everything had changed so quickly. I was now living in a beautiful prison, protected by a dangerous man who looked at me with eyes that seemed to see more than I wanted to reveal. And somewhere out there, another dangerous man, Vittorio Castellano, might be planning to use me to strike at Luca, all because of a resemblance to a woman I'd never met. As I drifted toward sleep, I wondered what Adriana would think of all this. The woman whose ghost seemed to hover in the spaces between Luca's words. Had she chosen this life willingly? Had she loved him? And in the end, had his protection been enough to save her? The questions followed me into uneasy dreams, where amber eyes watched from shadows and car accidents happened in slow motion, again and again and again. The first rays of dawn were filtering through the curtains when I woke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous day came rushing back as I stared at the ornate ceiling. This wasn't a dream. I was really living in Elisabetta Vargo's home, under Luca's protection, hiding from enemies I'd never met. A soft knock at the door preceded Rosa's entrance with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Miss Emma," she said cheerfully. "The Signora thought you might prefer to eat in your room this first morning. She says to join her in the garden room when you're ready." I thanked her, surprised by the thoughtfulness. The tray held fresh pastries, fruit, and coffee that smelled heavenly compared to the instant variety I usually drank. As I ate by the window overlooking the winter garden, I noticed a black car parked discreetly at the edge of the property, a man visible in the driver's seat. Security, I presumed, a reminder that the danger was real. After showering in the ensuite bathroom with its marble fixtures and luxury toiletries, I dressed in clothes that had mysteriously appeared in my closet overnight. All new, all exactly my size, all far more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. The presumption should have bothered me, but the practical part of my brain appreciated not having to wear yesterday's clothes. Elisabetta was waiting in the garden room as promised, a stack of books beside her chair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as I entered, assessing me with those sharp amber eyes. "The clothes suit you," she observed. Luca has good taste. Luca chose these? I asked, smoothing the soft cashmere of the sweater I'd selected. He provided guidelines. My assistant handled the actual shopping. She set her book aside. Sit. We have much to discuss before my grandson returns. I took the same chair as yesterday, noting the absence of Paolo or any other staff. Where is Luca? Business, she replied dismissively. He left early this morning. He'll return for dinner. Her tone suggested this was a normal occurrence that required no further explanation. Now, about your duties here. For the next hour, Elisabetta outlined what would be expected of me, accompanying her to doctor's appointments, helping with medications, reading to her when her eyes tired, and generally providing companionship. The requirements were straightforward, and, truthfully, less demanding than I'd anticipated. You will have considerable free time, she concluded. I am not an invalid, despite what my grandson believes. I've arranged for your nursing school enrollment to be transferred to online courses where possible, with secure transportation to in-person labs when necessary. You've thought of everything, I said, impressed despite myself. A small smile curved her lips. I've had 92 years to learn the value of preparation, my dear. She adjusted her glasses, her expression growing more serious. Now, there are rules you must understand. For your safety. The rules were clear. I was not to leave the house without security. I was not to post on social media or contact anyone outside a pre-approved list without clearance. My mother could know I had a new job as a companion, but nothing about the Vargo family's true business or the danger I was in. These restrictions are temporary, Elisabetta assured me, noting my expression. Once the current situation is resolved, normal life can resume. And how exactly is Luca planning to resolve the situation? I asked carefully. Elisabetta studied me for a long moment. There are some questions better left unasked, Emma. Not because you don't deserve answers, but because answers make you complicit. The implication was clear. What I didn't know couldn't implicate me. I nodded, understanding even as a chill ran down my spine. One more thing, she said, reaching for a small velvet box on the side table. This is for you. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a stylized shield with what appeared to be a family crest. It's beautiful, I said, confused by the gift. But I don't understand. It is the Vargo family emblem, Elisabetta explained. Within certain circles it will be recognized. It marks you as under our protection. She gestured for me to turn around. Allow me. As she fastened the necklace around my throat, her fingers surprisingly nimble for her age, I couldn't help feeling that this was more than jewelry. It was a brand of ownership, a visible sign that I belonged to the Vargo family now. The pendant rested just below the hollow of my throat, cool against my skin. Thank you, I said, unsure what else to say. Elisabetta patted my hand. It was Luca's idea. He wanted you to have it immediately. Before I could respond, Paolo appeared at the door. The car for Mrs. Collins's mother has arrived, Signora. My heart leaped. I'd almost forgotten that today was the day Mom would be transferred to Lakeside Manor. Can I go with them? I asked eagerly. Elisabetta nodded. Luca anticipated you would want to. Everything has been arranged. Her eyes softened slightly. Family is important, Emma. We understand that. An hour later, I was sitting beside Mom in a private ambulance, holding her hand as we traveled to Cambridge. She was confused about the sudden transfer, but delighted by the upgrade. It must be costing a fortune, she kept saying, worry lines creasing her forehead. It's taken care of, I assured her, the weight of the Vargo pendant heavy against my skin. My new job includes housing and better medical benefits. It wasn't exactly a lie, though it certainly wasn't the whole truth. Lakeside Manor was everything the brochures had promised, spacious, bright, with a staff-to-patient ratio that ensured personalized care. The director herself showed us to Mom's new room, a private suite overlooking the facility's namesake lake, now frozen in winter's grip, but still beautiful. This is too much, Mom whispered when we were alone, tears in her eyes. Emma, how can you afford this? I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I told you. It's part of my new compensation package. I'm working as a companion to an elderly woman while I finish my nursing degree online. Her family is, well, connected. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd always been able to tell when I was hiding something. What's her name? This woman you're working for. Elisabetta Vargo, I answered, seeing no reason to lie about that detail. Recognition flickered across her face. Vargo, like the real estate family? I nodded, relieved she knew only the legitimate side of the business. Her grandson runs the company now. He arranged everything. That's very generous, she said, still looking suspicious. What's the catch? No catch, I lied, forcing a smile. I'm just lucky. We spent the rest of the visit touring the facility and meeting her new care team. 2 men in suits, Luca's security, I assumed, maintained a discreet distance throughout, never interfering but always watching. Their presence was both reassuring and a stark reminder of why all this was necessary. As I prepared to leave, Mom caught my hand. Emma, she said, her voice suddenly clearer than it had been in months. Be careful with these people. Rich families like that, they have their own rules, their own world. If only she knew how right she was. I'll be careful, I promised, kissing her cheek. I'll visit again soon. Back at the Vargo house, I found Elisabetta napping, and the place quieter than before. I retreated to my room, overwhelmed by the day's emotions. Mom was safe, receiving better care than I could have ever provided on my own. Whatever the cost of my new arrangement with the Vargos, that alone made it worthwhile. I was sitting by the window, watching the early winter sunset, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. Daily check-in time. How's the new job? The rich grandma treating you okay? I smiled, typing back. All good. Moved Mom to Lakeside today. The job is easier than expected. Grandma is actually pretty cool. Her response came quickly. Wow, Lakeside? That place costs a fortune. What's the catch? And more importantly, have you seen the hot grandson again? I hesitated, unsure how much to share even in vague terms. Finally, I replied, benefits package includes Mom's care. And yes, he was here yesterday. Business keeps him busy. Business, right? What kind exactly? Google says real estate, but rumors say otherwise. My throat tightened. I don't ask questions about the business. Better that way. There was a longer pause before her next message. Emma, are you safe? Because you're starting to sound like someone in a witness protection program. Do I need to call someone? I'm fine. I type back quickly. Just respecting employer privacy. Stop watching crime shows. We exchanged a few more messages before I ended the conversation, promising to call her in a few days. The exchange left me unsettled. How long could I maintain this facade with the people I cared about? How much danger was I really in? As if summoned by my thoughts, a soft knock at the door preceded Luca's entrance. He'd clearly just arrived home. His copper hair was windblown, his suit jacket draped over one arm, his tie loosened. I'm told the transfer went well, he said, remaining near the doorway rather than coming further into my room. I nodded, turning from the window to face him. Mom settled in. The place is amazing, Luca. Thank you. Something in his expression softened at my gratitude. You don't need to thank me for fulfilling our agreement. His eyes dropped to the pendant at my throat, and satisfaction flickered across his face. I see Nonna gave you the necklace. My fingers rose automatically to touch it. Yes. She explained its significance. And how do you feel about wearing it? He asked, watching me closely. Conflicted, I admitted honestly. It feels like a mark of ownership. He moved further into the room then, stopping a few feet from where I sat. Not ownership, Emma. Protection. There's a difference. Is there? I echoed his words from yesterday. It tells others that I belong to your family, that you're valued by my family, he corrected gently, which makes you untouchable to most. Most, but not the Castellanos, I surmised. His expression darkened. No. To them, it makes you an even more tempting target. He hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. Which is why I need to ask something difficult of you. Wariness crept up my spine. What is it? I need to make our connection appear more significant, to justify the level of protection surrounding you. His amber eyes held mine steadily. I need the world to believe you're important to me personally, not just an employee. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You want to pretend we're together? Romantically? Yes. No hesitation, no embarrassment, just that direct gaze that seemed to see through all my defenses. It would explain your sudden presence in my life, your residence here, the security measures, and make me an even bigger target, I pointed out. On the contrary, he leaned forward slightly. It would make the consequences of harming you catastrophic. No one would dare touch the woman publicly claimed by Luca Vargo unless they were prepared for all-out war. The calculated nature of his proposal sent a chill through me, so I'd be a deterrent, a human shield. Anger flashed across his face. No, never that. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. This isn't how I wanted to have this conversation. Then how did you want it? I challenged, rising to face him. He stopped, running a hand through his already tousled hair in a gesture that seemed surprisingly human for someone so controlled. I wanted more time, he admitted finally. Time for you to know me better. Time for you to see that there's more to me than what you've heard or assumed. Something in his voice, a vulnerability I hadn't expected, caught me off guard. Why does it matter what I think of you? Luca's eyes met mine, and for once they were completely unguarded. Because from the moment I saw you at Vermilion, I knew you were different, special. The resemblance to Adriana caught my attention. Yes, I won't deny that. But it's not why I'm standing here now. Then why are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal, because despite the insanity of the circumstances, despite the danger and complications, I find myself drawn to you, Emma. Your strength, your loyalty to your mother, your unflinching honesty. His voice dropped lower, and I think, perhaps, you feel something too, something that confuses and frightens you. He wasn't wrong. Since that first night at the restaurant, I'd felt an inexplicable pull toward Luca Vargo that defied all logic and self-preservation. Even now, with all I knew about him, about the danger surrounding him, I couldn't deny the electricity that crackled in the air between us. This isn't real, I said, more to convince myself than him. Whatever this is, it's circumstantial. Adrenaline and fear and gratitude all mixed up together. A small, sad smile touched his lips. Perhaps. But does that make it any less powerful? Before I could respond, his phone rang, a sharp intrusion of reality into the charged moment. He answered with a terse word in Italian, his expression immediately hardening as he listened to the caller. After a brief exchange, he hung up, all trace of vulnerability gone from his face. I have to go, he said, his voice once again that of the Mafia Boss, not the man who'd just laid his feelings bare. We'll continue this conversation later. Luca, I started, not sure what I wanted to say, but feeling like something needed to be said. He paused at the door, looking back at me with an intensity that stole my breath. Think about what I've said, Emma, about all of it. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with thoughts and emotions too tangled to unravel. Dinner that night was a quiet affair with just Elisabetta and me. Luca had not returned, and no one offered an explanation for his absence. The elderly woman seemed distracted, checking her phone more often than usual, a strangely modern gesture from someone who otherwise seemed from another era entirely. Is everything all right? I finally asked, as Paolo cleared our dessert plates. Elisabetta's sharp gaze assessed me. Business matters, she said simply. Then, with a slight softening of her expression, my grandson takes risks sometimes. Calculated ones usually, but risks nonetheless. A cold knot of fear formed in my stomach. Tonight? He's taking risks tonight? He is resolving a situation, she replied carefully, one that threatens what he values. The Castellanos. It had to be. Will he be safe? I asked, unable to keep the concern from my voice. Something knowing flickered in her amber eyes. So like Luca's. You care for him already, she observed. despite your best judgment. It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew the truth of it, however irrational it might be. Luca has never been a man to wait when action is required, she continued, her gnarled fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass. The Castellanos threatened something precious to him once before, and he lost Adriana. He will not lose you too. The blunt statement hung in the air between us. I'm not Adriana, I said quietly. No, Elisabetta agreed. You are not. You are Emma Collins, a different woman, with her own strength, her own heart. She reached across the table to pat my hand. Which is why my grandson is drawn to you, beyond any superficial resemblance. I wanted to ask more, about Adriana, about Luca, about what exactly was happening tonight, but the look in Elisabetta's eyes told me she'd said all she intended to. Instead, we finished our tea in companionable silence before she retired for the evening, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Unable to sleep, I wandered the house, eventually finding myself in the study where Luca and I had spoken the day before. The room felt like him somehow, elegant but masculine, with books that showed actual wear rather than serving as mere decoration. I ran my fingers along the spines, noting titles in English, Italian, and what looked like Latin or Greek. He reads in 7 languages. Paolo's voice came from the doorway, startling me. The signore has always been a scholar at heart. I turned to find the house manager watching me with an expression less severe than usual. I didn't mean to intrude, I said, embarrassed to be caught snooping. The signore said you should consider the house your home, he replied, entering the room and moving to the bar cart. Perhaps a cognac to help you sleep? The nights can be long when one is waiting. The acknowledgement that he understood my worried state was unexpected. Thank you, I said, accepting the small crystal glass he offered. Have you worked for the family long, Paolo? All my life, he answered simply, as did my father before me. I sipped the cognac, its warmth spreading through my chest. And Adriana? Did you know her too? Something like grief passed across his usually stoic face. Miss Adriana was special, kind to everyone, regardless of position. She brought light into this house, and Luca loved her, I said softly, not really a question. Paolo was quiet for a moment, considering his response. The signore planned to marry her. The ring was chosen. The proposal planned for the weekend she died. He met my eyes directly. Her death nearly destroyed him. The revelation hit me harder than I'd expected. Of course, Luca had loved Adriana. Truly loved her, not just as a passing affair. And her death, meant for his family, had shattered him. It explained so much about his determination to protect me, his intensity, his fear. Thank you for telling me, I said, finishing my cognac. Paolo nodded once. The signore should be home soon. He left instructions not to wait up, but... A slight smile touched his lips. In my experience, such instructions are rarely followed by those who care. With that surprisingly perceptive observation, he took my empty glass and left me alone in the study. I settled into one of the leather armchairs, intending to wait just a little while longer, but the day's emotions and the cognac's warmth soon lulled me into sleep. I woke to the sensation of being lifted, strong arms cradling me against a solid chest, a familiar scent of cologne mixed with the cold night air. My eyes fluttered open to find Luca carrying me up the stairs, his face cast in shadow. You're back, I murmured, still half asleep. I am, he confirmed softly. You shouldn't have waited up. Wanted to make sure you were safe, I admitted, too drowsy for pretense. His arms tightened around me almost imperceptibly. I'm safe, Emma. And so are you. There was a finality in his tone that suggested more had happened tonight than a simple return home. He carried me to my room, setting me gently on the bed. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see a cut above his eyebrow and what looked like bruising along his jaw. Without thinking, I reached up to touch the wound. You're hurt. He caught my hand, pressing it gently back to the bed. It's nothing. Rest now. We'll talk in the morning. And as he turned to leave, I found myself saying, Stay. The word surprised us both. Just until I fall asleep again. Luca hesitated, then nodded, settling into the chair near the bed. Sleep, Emma. I'll be here. With that reassurance, I drifted off again, vaguely aware of his watchful presence in the darkness. Morning light and the scent of coffee woke me. Luca was still there, though he'd moved to the window seat, a cup in his hand, and another waiting on my nightstand. He'd changed clothes, now wearing casual trousers and a soft-looking sweater, and cleaned up the cut on his forehead, though the bruise along his jaw had darkened overnight. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. "I thought you might want this before we talk." He nodded toward the coffee. I sat up, suddenly self-conscious about my rumpled clothes from yesterday and undoubtedly messy hair. "Thank you," I said, reaching for the cup and taking a fortifying sip. It was perfect, exactly how I liked it, which meant he'd been paying attention. Luca watched me with those perceptive amber eyes, waiting for me to be ready. Finally, setting the cup aside, I asked the question that had kept me awake last night. "What happened? With the Castellanos?" He moved from the window to sit at the foot of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance while still close enough for an intimate conversation. "It's over," he said simply. "Vittorio Castellano and his lieutenants have been persuaded to return to Chicago permanently. They will not trouble us again." The careful phrasing told me everything and nothing. "Did you kill them?" I asked directly, needing to know exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. "No," he answered, holding my gaze steadily. "Though I could have, perhaps should have. Instead, we reached an understanding, one enforced by certain influential parties who prefer peace between families." Relief washed through me, though I wasn't entirely sure why it mattered so much that his hands weren't bloodied. He was still who he was, a man who operated outside the law, who commanded fear and respect through the threat of violence, even if he hadn't enacted it this time. "So, I'm safe now?" I asked. "The threat is gone?" "Yes." His expression softened. "You're free to return to your life, Emma. Your apartment, your job at Vermilion, your old routine, all waiting for you, if that's what you want." The offer of freedom should have filled me with joy. Instead, I felt an unexpected hollowness at the thought of leaving this house, leaving Elisabetta, leaving Luca. "And my mother?" I asked, buying time to sort through my conflicted emotions. "The arrangement stands, regardless of your decision," he assured me. "Lakeside Manor, your tuition, all of it. I keep my promises, Emma." "Why?" I challenged softly. "Why would you do that if I choose to leave?" Luca was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his hands before returning to my face. "Because what I feel for you isn't conditional on your presence in my life. Because your happiness and welfare matter to me, even if you choose a path that doesn't include me." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my last defenses. In that moment, I saw past the Mafia Boss to the man beneath, complex, capable of both terrible power and surprising tenderness. "Paolo told me about Adriana," I said quietly. "That you were going to propose." Pain flickered across his face. "Yes." "I'm not her, Luca," I said, needing to be clear. "I can never be her replacement. I've never wanted you to be," he replied, his voice firm. "The resemblance caught my eye, yes. But it's you, Emma Collins, with your fierce loyalty and unflinching honesty, who has captured my heart these past days." The confession hung in the air between us, too significant to be casually acknowledged, too powerful to be ignored. "This is insane," I whispered. "We barely know each other. Then stay and let me know you," he said simply. "Not as a protected witness or an employee, but as yourself. Give us that chance, Emma." I looked at him, really looked at him. The dangerous, powerful exterior that concealed a man of intelligence, loyalty, and unexpected tenderness. A man who had risked his life to end the threat against me. A man who offered freedom with one hand while hoping I would choose to stay of my own accord. "I'll stay," I heard myself say. "Not forever, not yet. But for now, to see where this leads." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking through clouds, brilliant and warming. He reached for my hand, raising it to his lips in that old-world gesture that had affected me so strongly before. That's all I ask. Time to show you who I really am, beyond the name and reputation. And if I decide this life isn't for me? I asked, needing to be certain of my escape routes. Then I'll let you go, he promised, though I could see how much it cost him to say it. With protection still in place, but from a distance. You would always be free, Emma. In that moment, I believed him. Whatever else Luca Vargo might be, he was a man of his word, a man who valued choice and agency alongside protection and loyalty. He stood, still holding my hand. There's something I'd like to show you, if you're willing. Get dressed and meet me downstairs in 30 minutes. Curiosity piqued. I nodded. After he left, I showered and changed into some of the new clothes, including a warm coat as Luca had suggested. Downstairs, I found him waiting in the foyer, car keys in hand. Where are we going? I asked as he helped me into my coat. Somewhere important to me, he replied, offering no further explanation. We drove ourselves. No driver, no security detail, which seemed to be a rarity based on Paolo's surprised expression as we left. Luca handled the sleek black car with the same confident ease he approached everything, navigating through Boston's morning traffic until we reached the outskirts of the city. He finally parked at what appeared to be a small private cemetery overlooking the harbor. Taking my hand, he led me through iron gates and along a winding path until we stopped before a simple but elegant headstone. Adriana Rossi, the marble red. Beloved daughter, healer, light in the darkness. Dates marking a life cut tragically short at 26. Luca stood silently beside me, his hand warm around mine despite the winter chill. After a moment, he spoke softly. I come here every week, to remember, to promise her that her death wasn't in vain. I squeezed his hand gently, understanding now why he'd brought me here. This wasn't about comparing me to Adriana or expecting me to fill her shoes. It was about honesty, showing me the pain that had shaped him, the loss that haunted him still. She would have been an incredible doctor, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. Brilliant, compassionate. She saved my grandmother's life once, recognized a stroke when everyone else thought it was just fatigue. She sounds remarkable, I said sincerely. She was. He turned to face me, his eyes reflecting both past grief and present hope. I loved her, Emma. I won't pretend otherwise or diminish what she meant to me, but grief has a way of changing over time, of making room for new beginnings, if we're brave enough to accept them. I understood then what he was offering, not a replacement for what he'd lost, but a new chapter, written together if I was willing. I'd like to hear more about her someday, I said, when you're ready to share those memories. Relief and gratitude washed over his face. He raised a hand to my cheek, his touch gentle as he brushed a strand of hair from my face. You are extraordinary, Emma Collins. As we stood there in the quiet cemetery, the winter sun breaking through clouds to cast golden light across the headstones, I felt something shift inside me, fear giving way to possibility, suspicion to tentative trust. Whatever path lay ahead with Luca Vargo would not be simple or without risk. But in that moment, I knew it was a path I wanted to explore. Later, as we drove back toward the city, Luca's phone rang. He answered with a brief greeting, listened for a moment, then said simply, "Good. Proceed as discussed." After hanging up, he glanced at me. Your former apartment has been cleared out. Your belongings are being delivered to the house. You assumed I'd stay, I observed, though without real anger. A smile touched his lips. I hoped. There's a difference. Is there? I echoed for the third time, but now with a teasing note in my voice. His smile widened to a grin that transformed his whole face, making him look younger and carefree. Yes, Emma, there is. And I look forward to showing you exactly what that difference means. As the Boston skyline came into view, gleaming in the winter sunlight, I felt my own smile forming. The future stretched before us, complicated, uncertain, but full of possibilities. I was no longer the invisible server, and Luca was more than just the dangerous mafia boss who had commanded the restaurant to silence with 5 quiet words. We were 2 people with painful pasts and guarded hearts, finding unexpected connection in a world designed to keep us apart, whatever came next, whether lasting love or eventual parting. I knew my life had irrevocably changed the night Luca Vargo had looked at me across a crowded restaurant and softly said, "Smile for me, not for him." And for the first time since that night, I smiled. Not the practiced server smile I'd perfected over years in the service industry. Not the reassuring smile I gave my mother when I wanted to hide my worries, but a real smile, genuine and just for him. Luca's amber eyes warmed as he took in my expression, his hand finding mine across the center console. "There it is," he said softly. "The smile I've been waiting to see." We drove on toward whatever future awaited us, hand in hand, neither of us looking back.